Hi, welcome back to another episode of Wild Interviews with Fabrizio Lazarde. Today we have no more than greater guest Simon Bruslund. He is part of an incredible project I've been following since many years back, and it is the Silent Forest Project, which was started by the European Association of Tourism Aquariums, IETA, to, to help different threatened songbird species around the world, but mostly focused on Southeast Asia. Welcome, Simon. It's awesome to have you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. It's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to this talk.
Great. So, well, uh, before we continue, I would like to say that today we have a new concept within the interviews. We will be sharing images of the species we'll be talking about and of the project and of everything. So stay tuned. It will be a really great interview. I'm sure of that. So well, Simon, let's get going. First of all, what can you tell us about you? How did you start working with animals? Uh, how did you start with the Silent Forest project? And a little more about you.
Okay. Well, I was quite young when I started into being interested in animals and wildlife, and I started like many by having animals in my home with in my room with my parents' house, and I was having like little insects and soon it became birds that I was fascinated by. And when I was just 7 years old, I got my first canaries and it grew. And when I got older, I was quite sure I need to work in a zoo because this is what I want and what I love. And so I'm from Denmark, and I currently work in Germany, and my passion for animals and my occupation in zoos have taken me to many countries. So I worked for a long time in Qatar. I worked in Spain. I was for 6 months in Madagascar. I have worked in Brazil, and so I've really had the chance to travel, and that's another passion to see the world, which is very difficult nowadays. But so I had the big fortune of making my hobby to my livelihood and to enjoy every day. But don't tell my boss that I see it as a hobby. You know, he would stop paying me, and I would still work. So
Oh, oh well, Simon, don't worry. The secret,
it's a
it,
secret, yeah.
yeah, is kept with me.
I
But
appreciate it.
but now that you mentioned, it is very important that people working in ex situ programs also experience the in situ programs for the species they work with, and that's something that is very good that you have had the opportunity to experience, and also that you are both enjoying and working to save several species.
Mm.
So it's great. You you are working in Vogelpark Marlow right now, Germany, right?
Yeah.
So with what species do you work with there?
So my job at Vogelpark Marlow is quite different than my past experience because I used to work very closely with the animals all the time, and that has changed. I'm now working as a conservation manager or a conservation coordinator. So that means I'm following the interest of the park in supporting conservation projects around the world, and that's very diverse. We're a small park, but we still have conservation projects in many countries. We have projects for lemurs in Madagascar. We have projects for penguins in Chile, but we also have a lot of projects for small songbirds. With the Silent Forest program, is part of my job, so I follow the Silent Forest program, and the bird park Marlow is then paying my time to do that. And so I'm I'm engaging with people around the world, and nowadays mostly with video conferences. But and that makes it very interesting. But it also feels very important because when we can contribute and make a project happen with funding, or sometimes just with technical assistance, then it's a really nice feeling, and you have the exposure to the animals all the time. So I like that.
Well, this is something that many people, and most of the conservationists I've interviewed, have told me that when you feel that moment, when you're reintroducing an species, or when you are simply working for the protection of a place that is the home of a threatened species or something like that, they always feel that passion or that feeling that you are doing something good and you are doing something that will hopefully uh, help or um, protect the species, you know.
Yeah.
And yes, that's really incredible. You know, uh, that position you have, it's also a very important one because you practically decide which NGOs and which projects around the world to support, right?
Yeah.
And well, we hadn't had the opportunity to talk about it with other interviews, so this will be a nice interview. I'm sure of that.
Well, what we sometimes do, of course, is that when we are in contact with an NGO doing a project somewhere in the world and we think it's an important cause, then we work with them to develop their concept and their planning, because the conservation in the end is a whole lot of planning, thinking, involving people, getting an idea out, and then make sure that everybody having a buy-in and agree on the direction it's taking. Because only when you work with people you can be successful in this. And I think, just come back to your comment before, I think one of the things I enjoy most with projects is the aha effect. So the aha effect is when let me give you an example. I have worked on some small islands in Indonesia, and there are some fantastic birds that only exist on these islands. They're endemic. That means they exist nowhere else. But when you talk to the local people there, they're like, oh yeah, we know they're getting less and they're disappearing and it's a big pity. But there, in your country, in Germany, there's many of them still. And then you go, no, but there's not. They only exist on your island. That is your treasure that you're losing, and we all will lose forever. And when this sink in, when the people understand how true this is, it's like, and I love that. That's the aha effect. That's when people buy into a project and get involved. That's the best part.
And that's a very you know, when I talked with, for example, Carl Jones from the Dora Wildlife Trust in Mauritius, that's something he told me, that we need to embrace the local people in this project, because without the local people, it is most probably that it won't progress or it won't uh, get anything. And reacting to your comment, it was somewhat sad to hear that those people thought that the captive population, if their bird in their island went extinct, then oh no, they are in captivity, so nothing happens. But what about the species that aren't in captivity? If they disappear, well, we will never see them again, or do something for it. Yeah, it's a very rough topic. But well, now that you are showing us some images of the Silent Forest project, how did you start working with them? What inspired you to support the Silent Forest project?
Well, the whole thing started about 10 years ago. We were a group of people working in zoos, mostly zoo curators from European zoos, and we found out that there is a problem going on in Asia with over exploitation, with harvesting too many birds from the wild, and we thought that might be a real problem, but nobody really had the information. And we thought it would be important to exchange information more with each other. So we started a small group. And whenever there was a big zoo conference, we made sure we had a meeting between us and exchanged the information. It was very interesting. It was very exciting for me to be involved in this. And I felt this is some of the most important work that I've ever been involved with, because it really is an important topic that nobody seemed to know anything about at that time. And the interesting thing was that we were always like a side group. When you go to a big zoo conference, there's a big lion meeting, there's a big rhino meeting, the great apes, they have almost their own conference, it's and then the songbird group was, okay, you can have the room in the basement and, come back when you're finished. We really didn't get acknowledged for this work. So, and that for me was the inspiration to apply to do the EASA campaign. And these campaigns are an opportunity to bring a subject on the agenda, which is not so well known, and spread it, not just in the zoos, but also beyond to the zoo visitors and things. And I must admit, when we applied for this, I was not sure that it was going to be successful, or even that we're going to get approved to do this campaign. It's the first campaign only for birds. And I remember some colleagues were like ridiculing the subject. There was like birds and then songbirds. And I'm like, there's so many more important things out there. Why do you spend your time on this? And I think in the end, this has been the biggest achievement with this campaign, is that we brought the subject of songbirds and songbird conservations back on the agenda for conservation.
But more importantly, you made history with that campaign because, as you mentioned, it was the first ever campaign only focused on birds. It was showcasing a group of species not known, and as you said, many people really don't care, but don't really pay attention to the small bird that is singing in the forest, or to the small bird that is at there. And when you see them disappearing, oh well, there's not the song, but yeah, the songbird, I don't know. But that's something that it's really inspiring for other people. Like, do this for these birds. And also, as you mentioned, that's one of the things of this channel. We want to interview and to let people know about the species that aren't as known as we think, like the pink-fairy armadillo, all of the species of songbirds we are gonna talk about. And well, sometimes I feel that everybody is talking about the same, about the elephants, great apes, about giraffes, lions. But what about these other small species that are endangered and need our help, but nobody know about it?
Yeah, and it's amazing. You're like, and I like that you're saying this. But when you look at songbirds' diversity and the sheer volume of different forms and shapes and colors is mind blowing. So we're talking about 6,600 species at the current state. And it's just difficult to keep all of these species, in your mind and think about and know all of them, because there's so many, and many of them are maybe little gray birds that, you see them flying in the trees. You don't even see them up close, and they're so small, but they have beautiful song. They have important roles in the ecosystem, and that makes them so interesting and exciting. And then some of them are seriously threatened. And I mean, you're talking about lion conservation, and there's 15,000 lions, but some of these songbirds that we work with at the moment, there's a handful surviving. There's small birds, so it's heartbreakingly how threatened they are.
Of course, it is heartbreaking.
Well, let me show you some pictures. If we go on the Silent Forest website here,
sure.
I have some of the flagship species. Because there's so many species, it's almost impossible to make a campaign for all of them. We found out that quite early, that if we want to have 20 or 30 or 100 species, then people will be lost in this because they don't know them. So we choose some representatives. So these birds are ambassadors for all their other species.
Wow.
Which are also threatened. And we call it, flagship species. But this is the Bali myna, which is one of those species that actually went extinct in the wild because of the trade mainly. And now it survives in the national park in northern part of Bali. And it's a small area, and they're still threatened. But birds are being captive bred and released in the wild to jump this population. And we have projects to support this work, but we also thought that the Bali myna is one of the most fantastic examples of a species which got beyond the point of surviving in the wild, was saved by zoo populations, and now one of our oldest breeding programs. So we have more than 30 years of Bali myna breeding program,
Wow.
which is a good example for other species that we maybe can save in the future.
And well, now that you talk of the Bali myna, yeah, it is like one of the songbird species that has been more focused on in the breeding program, at least in Europe, that I've heard of.
Yeah.
And oh well, speak, continue.
No, it's fine. But the Bali myna, exactly, it is like an established species, but also, of course, it is for us as an ambassador, it's representing the species that people own because of status symbol. Because people in Asia and Indonesia and many other parts of the world like the Bali myna because it's something rare. So it's like a prestige to own one. And that's why they're disappearing in Asia, because people want to own one of these and show how important they are. So this is the status symbol species.
Well, Simon,
below it, we have another starling, which is the hill myna. And the hill myna is widely distributed in Asia, but it's threatened everywhere it occurs because of overexploitation. And some species, because there's 5 species of hill mynas, and some species are only on a small island, like the Nias hill myna. And that's one of the species I personally work a lot with. And the Nias hill myna is maybe less than 200 in the wild, or even in captivity together. 200 birds.
In Sumatra, right? In the wild.
Yeah. They live in Sumatra and off islands off the coast of Sumatra. So, and on the small islands of Sumatra, it's a separate species.
Well, that's amazing. You know, yeah. I had the opportunity to talk with the creator of ISCP. Indonesian is a foundation, you know, and he's working with the Nias hill myna. I was going to ask about it because it's a species that has also been very hit by all of these threats, and well, it's as the Bali myna. Stunning, simply beautiful, and I imagine their songs are also like that, right?
Well, that's the thing, that they don't actually have a pretty song. They do make some nice sounds, but what the mynas do is that they imitate voices. They imitate everything they hear. And actually, the hill myna in some places are almost really sacred, and the scientific name Gracula religiosa indicates this also, that they are revered birds. And you can imagine they're so good at imitating voices of humans because it's a kind of similar tone, so they can imitate the individual voice of a person. And then imagine you're a primitive people in the ancient days living in a village somewhere in Asia, and your grandfather dies, but the bird speaks with his voice. It can only be a sacred bird that you revere. The problem is, of course, in the time it becomes a toy. So the reason for holding the hill mynas is entertainment. People catch one in the forest, they teach it to speak, they put it in their shop or in their home, or the children talks to it, and it becomes a toy, entertainment, television, if you like. So this is the problem with the Nias hill myna. It's an entertainment tool, and everywhere they're threatened because of this. The next one is the Jarvan green myna, magpie. The Jarvan green magpie is an awesome bird that lives in just the certain mountains of Java. So it's a very secretive, rare bird from the mountaintops in the cloud forest, which you hardly ever see. And because they're so rare, they've become a collector's item. And they're protected, so that it's not so much about having something where you have prestige or something for entertainment. No, this is something for the very few people who has the money and the energy to get this very rare bird. And that is normally maybe not such a big problem, because if there's many, then a few people who can have them. But because this is already so rare. A few birds with a few people is already devastating for the population.
Yeah.
So this is a collector's bird.
By the way, now that you mentioned the collectors, I've been reading about all of uh, how the exotic pet trade affects all of these birds, and I think it is cultural. Uh, in Southeast Asia, that having a bird and a songbird is like you mentioned, kind of a prestige, or kind of, well, I have songbirds and they song for me, and it's something local, or I don't know how to say it, but yeah, you know,
Yeah.
it people, if they have a songbird, they are like, oh my god, yeah, we have a songbird, and everybody needs to have songbirds. And sadly, as you mentioned, this is something that is affecting wild populations, because, for example, this species, how many are there in the wild?
This species, we think that they're very close to extinction. So maybe there's 20 or 40. We don't know exactly, and maybe even less, because these areas where they occur are so difficult to survey. So we have some projects at the moment. We have two projects for Jarvan green magpie in the wild, where the purpose of the projects is to approach the local villagers in this area to convince them not to track these birds anymore, to involve them in the protection of the species, and we will give them incentives. We can give them a livelihood in protecting the birds, which might be
Wow.
cheaper than trying to restore the bird later. So we can help people in those areas with other jobs, or with even being, because maybe in the future they can become like a Jarvan green magpie warden and take care of these birds in the wild. And
Amazing.
that is very possible, because these people, they love the birds, and actually they don't want them to go extinct, but they also need to have an income. So
Yeah.
it's a way of finding alternatives for them, and then some, in most cases, they're very happy to save the birds. So,
Amazing.
but some of the next birds here on the list, this is the Sumatran laughing thrush. We also call this the panda bird. It's black and white, so we thought, oh, it's a panda. Also, one of the species that the IC, what do you call it? The Sumatran program that you just talked about has been working with. But it's also it's a species that people buy as a master bird. That's what they call it, because they have an interesting voice. So they keep them close to other songbirds, which then pick up some of their energy and their songs, and then they have an opportunity to be better in the songbird competitions. And a lot of the birds are in these songbirds competitions, and the songbird competitions are in Indonesia almost like a national sport. So this is a kind of, it's a big event. You
Mm.
can buy all the merchandise. You can have a team you vote for. You can buy popcorn. You can really enjoy this. It's in television, the big events,
Wow.
and if you win the big cup, then you win prize money. But you also, of course, the bird you own increases its value a lot. And that's a big problem, because sometimes we have people, this next species is the straw-headed bilbil. They're in these songbird competitions. They have a beautiful song. And if you win with your straw-headed bilbil one of these competitions, then everybody sees in the television, oh, the straw-headed bilbil was the winner. And they go out in the forest and they try to find the straw-headed bilbil, because
Yeah.
maybe they can do it also. And this is one of the big problems. There's so many people interested in this sport, and everyone wants a bird.
Well, this actually reminds me of what happens with the falconry in the Middle East. That it's the same when they do these competitions, and actually I was reading an article about the current situation in Pakistan, where most of these birds of prey are taken off, and
Yeah.
it's very sad that, well, both of these in both of these areas, birds are being used like kind of a sport, as you mentioned. And it's okay if there are some, but the people that watch it say, I want one of that, like the one that won, or I want, and they go and take them from the wild. And that's, oh my God, that's something that it's really not helping at all to conservation.
No, indeed. But it is also the opportunity, because a lot of these people are so passionate about these birds. So it's just a question of gaining that energy and turning it into something good. And of course, it's a question of understanding the problems that you have, because sometimes it's easy, if you're passionate about birds and bird competitions or songbird competitions or hunting with falcons, to only see the one side. You only see your perspective. I want the bird, and this is important, and I enjoy it. So you forget the whole wider picture. And this is something that it's really important to open up for all of us, to understand the wider picture, to understand what effects does this have on the environment, on the birds, on the future of the species, and a lot of these birds. And it takes me to the last flagship species, is the white Rum Charmer, which is arguably one of the best singing birds in the world. They have a beautiful song, and it's a song that inspires people. It's just melancholic. It's fantastic. They varied it, so not one bird sounds exactly like the next bird. It really is wonderful song, and they are used to be in many countries in Asia, but in Indonesia now they've disappeared from almost every forest.
Oh,
They're only in the cages, and on the small islands they're disappearing. And this is a bird that you need to consider as a common bird, and it's just disappearing. And we think at any moment, there's maybe 3 million of these in cages in Indonesia. And that's a lot of birds taken out of the forest.
oh
Some
my.
are being bred, captive bred, but most of these are taken from the wild.
So, so you would say that this species is critically endangered or endangered in Indonesia, but is considered least concerned by the IUCN, right?
That's right.
So
That's a good.
Continue.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So this species have many subspecies. And of course, the concept of species and subspecies is always, evolution is not a straight line, and they don't have boxes. So some of these subspecies are quite extraordinary, distinct types. Some have only black tails. Some of them are genetically quite distinct, and maybe they are separate species. And only future research will prove if they are separate species or not a separate species. But in the end, this is some boxes we put them in. All of these subspecies, more than 50% of these subspecies are critically endangered or threatened or endangered. But because they're only subspecies, the IUCN does not recognize them as a separate category, which is a pity, but it's something we need to take into account when working with these species.
Of course. And that's something that it's actually a problem, because, for example, if one of those species or subspecies, goes extinct, and later it is found out that it was actually a species, then a species went extinct, and well, I understand taxonomy and all of this is very complicated, very complex, and it needs time, but yes, it's, oh my God, all of the species you have shown me, the only ones I didn't heard about were the white Rum Charmer and the one that was before, the bulbul.
The straw-headed bulbul.
The straw-headed bulbul, yeah. But the other two, they are like icons of songbird conservation, yeah. And the other three, it's a matter of pictures. Well, I will propose you something. As this interview is going well, very good, and everything with the photos, it's getting more than well explained. Why don't we do a 2-episode series? I know, people, you may You may not like it because you would like to see it complete, but let's do a 2 episode series. Why not? It will hopefully uh, provide you with less time to see the video and learn more, while also we will discuss more about this species, right, Simon?
That sounds good.
Well then, I hope you liked it. In the next episode, we will talk more about the Silent Forest project, about other species Simon has worked with, and also we will be talking about the in situ projects, or yeah, the species that Simon has worked with in the wild in Latin America, in Asia, and in Madagascar. So well, see you on next episode. Bye bye.
Bye.